Do you struggle to speak up in meetings? Do you often stay quiet, hold back your voice, hold back your opinions and ideas? If that's the case, then today's video is for you. Today's a very special video because I am interviewing my friend, my new friend, Jessica Chen. We've known each other for a little while now. She is the best-selling author of the book, Smart, Not Loud: How to Get Noticed at Work for All the Right Reasons. And I just love what Jessica has to share because so much of what she teaches aligns with the quiet achievers that I'm here to help. And the quiet achievers, you know who you are. If you're someone who is more introverted, you're shy, you're quiet in nature, but at the same time, you're driven, you're career oriented, you want to advance in your career, and you're recognizing that your communication is what's holding you back. If that's the case, then you definitely want to watch this interview with Jessica. She shared so many nuggets of wisdom, so much good information on how you can enhance your communication at work. Jessica Chen is an Emmy Award winner. She is a top keynote speaker, and she is the CEO of Soulcast Media, a business communication training agency. She's worked with major clients such as Google, LinkedIn, HP, Mattel, and many others, and she's also a LinkedIn learning instructor. She's been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and Entrepreneur magazines, and I'm so excited to introduce her to you right now. So watch the video and be sure to comment down below the word confident if you want to get your free guide on how to communicate confidently at work. For those of you who recognize that communication is an area that you want to enhance and elevate, and specifically you want to improve your confidence in this area, again, like I said, download our free PDF guide called Confident Communication at Work. In the comments, just write the word confident and we will send it your way. All right, without further ado, here is my interview with Jessica Chen. Welcome, Jessica. I am so excited for our conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks, Linda. I'm very excited for our chat today.
Yes, I really am, because the truth is we tried doing this several months back. This is before my book came out, The Quiet Achiever. And, of course, the intention of today is to talk about your book, Smart, Not Loud, which I hope people can see. And I just feel like there's so many parallels between what you talk about in Smart Not Loud and what I talk about in The Quiet Achiever, but we are hitting it from slightly different angles. And so I really think that the audience today is going to benefit from your wisdom and what you have to say, because a lot of the quiet achievers in the audience struggle with communication. And I know that that is your bread and butter. That is your area of expertise. So let's just start off, for those that don't know who you are, even though I've just introduced you, but if you could just share a little bit about who you are, your background, and what your message is in the world.
Yes, well, very happy to. Like I said, I'm thrilled to be here to be doing this with you and to, chat with your audience as well. So, as Linda mentioned, my name is Jessica Chen, and I'm the author of the book, Smart, Not Loud: How to Get Noticed at Work for All the Right Reasons. It was published in 2024 and it quickly became a communications bestseller. This book is really to help people, and like you said, a lot of similarities, people who are very smart, very hardworking, but they struggle with putting themselves out there. And as you know, Linda, is very important to do in the workplace. And the book is very much a communications book where I teach people exactly what to say and how to say it. But I think what makes that book, Smart Not Loud, unique is the framing of it. And we can dive into this. I call it quiet culture, loud culture, and how some of us are raised in a quiet culture, but we're now working in a loud culture. Now, before I even published the book, though, my career actually started out as a journalist. I'm here in the States, in the US, and I was working at ABC, NBC, all the big television networks. I did that for 10 years. And then about, 8 years ago, I left, started my own communications training company called Soulcast Media. And I'm so proud to say I've taught over 2 million people now how to improve their communication skills. And it just keeps going and going. And I just absolutely love it.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel like, I've been reading your book and I've seen snippets and where I literally had to stop myself and take down notes. Like I have my notebook here and I was taking down notes. I'm like, this is great information for me, but also I feel like little things that I can share with my audience too when it comes to, their communication. So if we just sort of rewind it a little bit. So you also talk about quiet culture versus loud culture. I mean, the people in the audience are people who I call quiet achievers. And so many quiet achievers or quiet professionals I work with say, I do great work. I deliver. I'm a hard worker, but I feel as though I'm getting passed up for promotions. I feel like people aren't noticing me. I feel as though I'm shrinking when I'm having to speak in front of others. So why do you think that hard work alone isn't enough anymore? And what do you need to do to be seen differently in the
Yeah.
workplace?
Such a good question. And I think the best way to share this, at least in what I think about it, is actually my own personal story of how I realized that this was important. Now, long story short, I was born and raised here in the US. My parents immigrated from Asia to here, like the American dream, so to speak. You come here, you raise your kids, hopefully they'll have a better and more successful future. Never, though, did my parents ever tell me, oh, Jessica, you gotta communicate, you gotta build visibility, you gotta put yourself out there. In fact, it was the opposite, right? When I started working as a journalist, as you can probably imagine, when you work on television, a lot of big personalities, extroverted people are actually very quite aggressive and in going after what they wanted. And I remember when I first started working right after school, it was hard. Like I struggled with speaking up in a meeting, sharing and pitching my idea. So one day in particular, I remember we're sitting in a team meeting and my manager is like talking about, okay, we have a great story that's going to be happening in our town. By the way, this is in Reno, Nevada. That was my first job at NBC. And it was actually the US Thunderbirds. And the Thunderbirds were going to come into town and they're going to put on an air show. And as part of their media campaign, they were going to let one reporter fly with them. And so he asked all of us who wants to do it. Now, I don't know about you, Linda. I thought this was like the coolest opportunity. So I courageously, and that's the word, courageously raised my hand and I said, I would love to do it. My manager looks at me. He goes, no problem. We'll get you a media pass. I can't even tell you, those 2 weeks, I was so excited. I was like telling my friends, my family, because when else are you going to have an opportunity to do a project like that? The day before the air show happens, we're sitting in our meeting again. My manager says, okay, Thunderbirds, that story is happening tomorrow. Bella, you get to do the story.
Not you.
You know that feeling of when you are looking forward to something, you are excited about something, and something just feels like it was like just yanked away from you. My heart felt like it just sank to the bottom of my stomach. My manager just kind of went on with that meeting like nothing unusual happened, but it bothered me so much. And I was like, what happened here? Like, what the heck happened? I again courageously walked up to my manager and I was like, hey, and I was like very nice. I was very polite. And I was like, hey, just wondering, why is Bella doing this story? I mentioned I was interested. Linda, I'll never forget what he told me. He looks at me and he goes, oh my God, Jessica, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot you said you wanted to do it. It was just that Bella, she kept talking about it and she was top of mind. Those words. Top of mind. Now, during those 2 weeks, I had thought about reminding my manager. I had thought about, bringing it back up to him. But I didn't do any of those things because I was creating this narrative in my own head. Oh, asking once, that's enough. Oh, if I remind him, I'm going to be bothering him. Oh, he's busy. I'm just going to, let it be. This moment was when I realized if I did not get good at communicating, if I did not get good at speaking up, telling people what I wanted or telling people like what I was interested in, more opportunities like this would pass me by. So I share this story not for people to feel bad for me. Yes, I didn't get to do it, but this was a pivotal moment in my own career because that was like that crossroads where I better get good at this. So that's a story where I always share with people because for any of us who work hard, who feel like we deserve this one thing, it's like you do deserve it, but just saying it once is often never enough. If you care about it, you got to go after it.
So good. And I remember even from the first time this story when you shared it and how heartbroken it was of a story. But then at the same time, it was pivotal, like you said, because it brought this new idea to you that you had to improve your communication. And then, of course, the book, Smart Not Loud, was born out of, from that journey. So that's amazing. I mean, in the sense that now that you teach this stuff, I know that with quiet achievers, one thing is that naturally, kind of like how you had said, you thought if I speak up or if I say something, I might be bothering him. They tend to, as quiet achievers, and I'm one as well, we tend to think that if we say too much, that we're going to be seen as too much, or that if we speak too often, or if we're ones that tend to like to just sort of stay in the background, we don't want the spotlight. I mean, what's the shift that one has to make in order to really step into being that more assertive, confident version of themselves?
So it's really interesting because I feel like a lot of times people have this like notion where like, oh, it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel natural. Therefore, I won't do it, right? Whatever it is that you want, think about it as you're going after it because you care about it. You care about it because it means a lot to you, right? A lot of times, my very nice, soft-spoken, smart professionals, they are so nice. They're so polite. They feel like if they put themselves out there, it's going to come across as very self-serving. It's going to come across as very selfish too, right? Like they're thinking about other people. And that's an amazing trait. And that's the thing. It's not about changing who you are, right? None of the things that I think what you're saying, the things that I teach as well, we're not trying to change the person you are innately. We're just trying to teach you new skills to expand the person you are, right? So think about it as, what is it that you care about? Why do you want to go after it? You're going after this because it means a lot to you, whether it's asking for that promotion, higher compensation, to get on that project, whatever it is, you care about it. And because that means something to you, you have to go after it. And let's talk realistically. At the end of the day, you do have to be your own best advocate. You might have a great manager. They might love you. You might love them. You have a great working relationship. But at the end of the day, they got things that they got to do too. If you want something and you care about something, you got to go after it because you cannot expect other people to be thinking about it for you.
I agree 100%. If that's the case, I think some of the quiet achievers, they're now getting excited. They're saying, yes, I agree. I need to advocate for myself. I need to stand up for myself. I need to speak for what I want. Where do we begin? I know this is a big question, and because really, they should begin by reading your book. I think of the clients that I work with. They'll say to me, when a manager comes to ask me a question, an impromptu question that I haven't yet prepared for, I freeze up, I blank out. And this happens often for my clients where versus if they go into a meeting and they know they have to speak, and they prepare ahead of time, they do a kick-ass job. They're amazing. But if they haven't prepared and they don't have the information in front of them because they always want to make sure that they're accurate with their information. How does one manage a situation as, I wouldn't say small, but as common as that?
Yeah, now we're getting into like the real tactical communication tips, which is great because, a lot of it can feel very theoretical, like, oh, you got to change this, you got to do that, right? But it's like, okay, no, let's learn these skills so we can expand the person you are, right? Okay, so your question was, how do you basically respond in a situation where you might not have the answers, right? And initially, when somebody asks you that, like what happens, right? Our heart starts pumping, like we're like, oh my God, it's like, it can be embarrassing, right? So there's two ways that I want people to think about a situation like that. The first one is transparency, right? It's not about like talking your way through it when you're like, I don't even know what I'm talking about, right? Like if you don't know something, just say you don't have that information, right? Just say it with that conviction. Like, I just don't have that information, but I can get it for you and I will let you know by the end of the day, right? Simple, yes. Right? Setting expectations, okay? Now, the second thing I would say is, even though you cannot answer that one question that person's asking you, can you basically pivot to what you can talk about, right? So it's very seamless in that way. So this person's asking you something and you're like, oh, I don't know the answer to that question. And you can say, oh, I don't have the answer to that question right now, but let me look into it and I'll get back to you. But what I can tell you is this, A, B, and C. It's not necessarily the direct answer to the question, but it might be related in some way. And that way of handling a situation like that is fantastic, by the way. It shows that you have composure. It shows that you know what you're talking about, but it shows that you have also that presence in many ways. So I hope that answers the question, but it really is as simple as that. It's doing those
No,
things.
that is actually exactly what I tell people too. And I love the way that you put it because the idea of if you don't have the exact answer, but you can share something that's related, that, like you said, shows that you're composed, that you're quick on your feet, you can think on the spot. And that's what people look to when they're looking at people who will become potential leaders, is the ability to answer a question. Even if they don't have the exact answer, they can share some insight or give some direction, as opposed to just freezing up, not knowing, not having the exact words to say. And one thing I talk about when it comes to this topic is, for me, I go more into sort of the emotional side of things, where it's this idea of, trusting your intuition when you're having a conversation with someone, in the sense that if they bring up a certain topic and something drops in intuitively about the topic that they're sharing, share that. Because I mean, in a way, I guess that's in a way the relevance to whatever it is that they're talking about. So for some people, seeing it that way might help as well. So I love that.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's more thinking about like if someone's asking you a question, like what are some key words this person is saying? And whatever those key words are, you pull it out and it's like a hook, right? You hook onto those words and then you're thinking, okay, Linda said, A, B, and C. What can I think about that's about A, B, and C? Oh, okay, this is how I can then continue the conversation in a very seamless way. Right. So that's the thing, and one of the things I talk about in my book is, so we know communications isn't just about speaking. Communications is also about listening, right? We know it's just as important. Listening makes you a good communicator. And I differentiate how there is a difference, though, between listening. You can be passively listening. Imagine you just listening to someone do a TED Talk. You're just passively soaking in their wisdom. But the other kind of listening is active listening, where you're truly like trying to figure out, what is this person actually trying to say and what can I say as a follow-up? When you're in a meeting, I always say, and especially maybe for quiet achievers, I know for people who are more quiet culture, it's easy for us to kind of sit in that passive environment where we're just like being that diligent, good, team player. We're just listening. But if you really want to build visibility, which is what we're talking about today, you got to go into active listening, finding that opportune time to chime in. That's the key.
Yes, I love that. So if we can tune into that a little bit more, because I did see that in the book too. I read that in the book, where you're saying active listening means that, just like you had said earlier, you're kind of looking for that opportunity. You're hooking on and finding that opportunity. And I think this is where a lot of quiet achievers, I hear, I had an idea. I wanted to share something, but then someone else said it. Or the meeting was over by the time I was ready to put up my hand and share it. So how do they find that right opportune time? Do I just jump in? Some people, they become too abrupt. They go on the other end of the spectrum. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
And I actually have a framework that can address this question that I have in the book, because I know a lot of people have experienced this, where they're in a meeting and they're like, I have an idea, but then you have like someone who's really loud, who's really dominant, who's just like talking. And you're just like, how do I do it? And isn't it the worst feeling? It feels like sometimes like a punch in the gut when you're like, I literally was just about to say that. And then you just don't get the credit because you just didn't say anything, right? So there's a sequence, I call it the 4A sequence. So this is like the communication tip again. Like, again, lots of knowledge when it comes to
Love it. No, feed it to us.
Yeah. So, okay. So the question is, imagine the scenario where you're in a meeting and you're like, I want to share my idea, but I just don't know how or when. So the 4A stands for 4A's. So the first A is active listening, right? We talked about this. You are sitting in this meeting with the intention of saying something. There's something really different. You're in this meeting because you have the intention to say something, meaning you got to go in with that active listening. Remember, active listening. What are people saying? What can I hook on to, right? Okay, somebody says something and you're like, oh, data. Oh, yeah, I have some information about this data that this person is talking about right now. That's your hook, right? Now that you've identified it, then you go into the second A, which is acknowledge. Acknowledge means, oh, Linda, that was a very interesting point you just made. I'm acknowledging you. I heard you, right? And if somebody is, very talkative, sometimes that's all they really need to hear, that someone is acknowledging them for them to back down. Acknowledging, and by the way, is a great way you can do that is just by saying their name. Linda, that's a great point, right? The third one is anchor. So anchoring means you are basically repeating that one word. You're anchoring that point. Remember, hook and anchor, it's like hooking and anchoring in some ways. You can kind of think of it as that.
Love that.
Right? You're hooking and then anchoring. So anchoring is then you repeat. Oh, Linda, that's a really interesting point. So you mentioned the word data. That's my anchor. And it made me think of X, Y, and Z, which goes into the fourth A, answer. What's the thing that you want to say? 4A, active listening, acknowledging, anchoring, and then answering. This works for any situation. This is how you can seamlessly chime into meetings, especially if it's very hard for you to do so.
So good. I think that's something that people can easily, as long as they memorize what each of the A's in the sequence, then they're good to go. So in terms of voice and presence, you talk about that a lot in the book as being, sort of the key parts of communication. And so for someone who has that, like you said, in quiet culture, we're raised to not necessarily overspeak, where we may even grow up just nurturing softer voices in a sense. So how do you develop a voice that sounds clear and credible, but at the same time not sound cold if you're going, you're going the end of the spectrum where you're being too aggressive? How do we balance that?
When you were asking that question, there was just like this one word that kept popping into my mind, and it's this: to really establish that presence with people and to be able to speak it in a way that resonates with people. The word that I keep thinking about is connection.
Yes.
You, as a speaker or someone speaking in a meeting, right? Your job is to tell people what you're thinking about, right? Like that's what you want. But how do you make sure it sticks? It's you being able to connect with the people in the room. It's you being able to connect the points of what it is that they care about, right? I really think that is the art of what makes a good communicator. It's kind of sometimes even seeing between the lines. Like, what are people actually saying? Connection can also mean connecting the dots. When you're in a meeting where there's like a million different ideas that people are throwing around, and you're like, how do I insert myself? Maybe your role in that meeting is to just connect the dots, right? You take what Jennifer said and link it to what Bob said, to link it to what Jennifer, like what James said. Like, that's like kind of what I mean, right? It's like, and I think for a lot of maybe quiet achievers, and I do know for a lot of my quiet culture people tend to be very perceptive. Like they're very, like they know what's going on. They're reading the room, right? And I think that's actually a superpower, right? That sometimes people who are very loud, who can go 100 miles an hour, they miss that. Like all they want to do is just talk, talk, talk. But you, as like the more quiet person, that's a superpower where you can take in what everyone's saying and then you can siphon it down to what's the most important part here. Like that could be your value add. And I think that's a way to think about, how do I add my presence so people listen? It's thinking about connection. It's like, how do I connect the points? How do I connect it to what people care about? It's all those things.
Yes, that is so true. I mean, with quiet achievers, I feel like they're one and the same in many ways. Quiet culture individuals, quiet achievers. One quality that, beyond the fact that they're hard workers and they're really good at what they do, I feel they're very thoughtful. They're very observant, perceptive, like you said, and they notice things that other people don't notice. But at the same time, they stay quiet. And so people don't notice that they notice these things. And so it's really about just verbalizing what you're noticing. It's as simple as that in many ways. So I want to ask a question, comes up very often for my quiet achievers, where they'll say that they're in a meeting. They want to share an idea. They know that they have to speak up. So they do have this intention. They have all the greatest intentions in the world to say something in their meetings. And then when it comes to them having their turn to speak up, their bodies take over. Nervousness, anxiety, tension, fear, it all sort of washes over them. And that then, even though they know they have good things to share, it doesn't come out the way that they want. It comes out jumbled. And I know structure. I mean, that's something that I know is very clear, that they need to have the structure so that they can have that flow. But just from the part of the nervousness and that energy, I mean, do you have any tips or guidance on that? Or do you feel that as long as you know the structure, that should override the nervousness?
Well, I actually have a great communication tip, but I want to actually ask you, like Linda, like if you feel nervous, like, what do you do? Like, how do you kind of like, overcome those bodily sensations that's telling you to do otherwise, like that fight or flight, right? Like, that's kind of what we're talking about. Like,
Yes.
what do you do?
Well, okay, so this is something that I'll tell you, even me having done doing the work as a coach that I've done now for the last decade, there are still times where I catch myself feeling nervous before an audience, feeling nervous but in a meeting where I know that I'm going to have to really share my expertise. And this is especially if it's like a corporate thing. So I'm not so far off from the quiet achievers in that sense. But what I have learned over the years and what I've been able to shift out of that, the way that I've been able to shift out of that is leaning on my expertise, because I know that I'm coming in from a place of expertise. I mean, I have knowledge to share that people are looking to me for, that they want me to share. And so if I lean and ground in on that, remind myself of that, I have more confidence when I walk into a meeting. And so I speak from that place. And it's something that I talk about where it's you kind of anchor yourself in your expertise and you have that point of view. And that is then what you share. And that's everything that you say comes from that place. And then people will respect, hopefully, what you have to say because they see that you're anchored in that level of expertise. So that's one technique that I share, but I'm curious if that aligns with what you have to say.
It does. And I think it's like, trusting what it is that you have to say, right? Like one of the things that I always teach people and what I always talk about when I speak is like, how do you expect people to believe or be excited about what you have to say if you yourself are not excited or don't believe it, right? Like, for anybody who's thinking about, oh, how do I be a good communicator? It's that sense of belief and owning what it is that you have to say. Like, it's not like rocket science in that way. It's just like, if you go in and you're like quivering and you're like nervous, people are going to be like, does Jessica know what she's talking about? Like, sounds like she's hesitant. So therefore, I don't know if I believe whatever she's saying, right? Like, I mean, it really comes down to owning, like that's really the word here. And again, how do you expect people to be excited about what you have to say if you yourself are not bought into it, right? Another thing, a lot of people go, well, but what do I do when I'm like starting to speak in circles? I'm starting to feel nervous, like as you're doing it, right? One of the things that I always teach people, and by the way, I actually have a communications podcast where I have all these communication tips. It's literally called Communicating Confidently with Jessica Chen. That's the podcast name. Lots more tips there. But one of the things, and I'm saying this because this is the one thing I said recently, if you find yourself talking in circles, all you have to do is just say the words. The point I'm trying to make here is A, B, and C.
Love
That's all you have to do. You catch yourself, you do a quick second of a pause, and you just go, the point I'm trying to make here is A, B, and C. You help basically reset the audience, but you're also resetting yourself. And that's just a great way to kind of like handle that situation. But again, speaking with conviction, making sure your message gets across requires you to have that sense of belief in that idea. That's really important.
Yes, yes, yes. I agree 100%. I mean, on this topic of having that conviction and that belief, a lot of us, quiet achievers or those raised in quiet cultures, we were sort of raised with and programmed to we only feel confident after we've achieved a certain level of success. It's like, I've proven myself. I've done the thing. So now I can feel good about it. But it's where, a lot of these quiet achievers that I work with, they're wanting to get to that next level and they're not yet at that next level. So they feel that they don't have the right to act like that leader that they want to be. And even though the whole messaging is you need to act like the leader before you can become the leader. What is the way that you would guide someone to have that shift internally first, to believe in themselves first, even before others see it, even before they've proven it to the world? I know this is a little bit of a deeper question.
No, I actually have some answers to that because actually recently I read this like saying, and I'm going to share it with you all. And I think this really resonates and this is the difference sometimes between like also men and women too. Like, I think it's sometimes it's like let's be real, it's very much, it's harder for sometimes women to think about that next level and how to get there, right? And all the barriers that we have to get through. And the saying that I was reading is that men get promoted based on the alliances that they have. Women get promoted based on their performance. So I'm going to say that again. Men get promoted based on the alliances that they make. women get promoted based on the performance. To me, when I read that, it doesn't seem fair, right?
Yeah.
It's not fair, right? How is it that women, we can have like an amazing performance and track record, yet we're not seen as being promotable in that way, right? But men, maybe they're doing half the work, but they have the right connection. So therefore they get that promotion, right? So when I read things like that, then I start to think, well, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm like, building my credibility? So then the question to your answer is, well, who can I go out there and, build connection with? Right. I always say, and this kind of goes back to the thing that you and I think are aligned on. Working hard is not enough. Like it isn't. Like working hard in and of itself is not enough. And the reason why it's not enough is because it's expected. Like we have to work hard, right? No one's going to hire you to not work hard, right? So
Yes.
yes, like you got to work hard, right? But what's the other 50%? Who do you know? It's like, who can also elevate you? Who is talking about you when you yourself are not in that room, right? So I think about, again, that word alliance, right? Who is advocating for you when you're not there, right? There's always that saying, like, it's all about who you know, but it's also about who knows you.
Yes.
Right. So I just want people to really remember and internalize that working hard is expected, right? You're smart, you graduate from a good college, you're doing everything right, you're hitting your deadlines. And again, that's amazing, right? We need that. We want that. But if you care about trying to get to that next level and making it feel like, fair in that way, you also got to double down in learning these other skills. And I say it as skills because it is a skill. Like for a lot of quiet culture people, a lot of quiet achievers, it's not natural for them to go out and do these things. And I'm not saying you got to go to happy hour, you got to socialize, because as an introvert, I don't love doing those things either. But,
Yeah.
you want to be smart in how you position yourself and how you, quote unquote, brand yourself. Career brand, that's like a term I have in my book, right? Like, how are you branding your career and yourself? And I make the argument in the book, if you don't control your career brand, somebody else is going to control it for you, and it might not be what you want it to be, right? So it's just thinking about these things.
Yes. So that brings a great topic, because I've gotten asked this question as well, which is, okay, I don't feel like I belong fully. I don't like talking about sports. I don't necessarily, feel as though I fit in with my coworkers. So how do I build connections with them when I don't have anything in common with them in a way? So what are your suggestions there? I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that, in terms of if they just feel naturally they don't fully fit in, how can they feel as though they can make those authentic connections and leverage those connections eventually to grow their career?
One of the things I always say is you don't need to be a huge sports fan to be able to talk about these things. But I do think it does take, having some common knowledge of like what is going on in the general news, right? Like so that at least you can go in and be in a group setting and you kind of know what people are talking about, right? Like I really do think like it doesn't take you to like dive deep into what happened in last night's game. Like you don't but who won, right? Like just even little things like that, right? The other thing is like, what are some universal things that all of us do every day? We have our weekends, we have activities, we might have family, we go on vacation, we like to eat, right? Like, like these are all different ways you can like connect and bond with people that yes, it might not be sports if that's not your thing. That's not my thing either. And I cannot really talk about it. But at least generally, if I'm going into like a quote unquote social event, I'll at least kind of have an idea of like what people are talking about, right? So, but again, it's like, what are the universal topics that people generally can have opinion on, right? And like, people say like, oh, what about shows? Shows are kind of like, because like if you watch the show, they don't watch the show, you can't really talk about it. But I say food, travel, like those are really good universal topics to bond with people about.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. And something that to add to what you're saying, the universal topics, we all like to eat. I mean, hopefully many of us like to eat, that you can bond with at work, and we all have certain activities that we all do. It's also a good way to pick one of those things and differentiate yourself in a way and kind of be known for, I really like to go to nice restaurants as an example, or I really like, I really love tacos and I know where the best taco spots are. And people can come to you for that almost in a fun, casual way. But then at the same time, it sets, when you're talking about career brand, you don't want to necessarily be known for tacos, but you want to be known for, friendly coworker who happens to have really great suggestions for certain restaurants as an example.
Exactly. And I think I just keep thinking about it's like just having like a point of view of it, right? Like,
Yes.
I think sometimes people are so nice and they're so polite, they have to be agreeable, right? But just have a point of view, right? Like some person can say like, oh, this is my favorite Italian restaurant. And you're like, that's not my favorite Italian restaurant, but I like this restaurant. And then now you can have like a discussion about it, right? Like I think sometimes we feel like we have to be so agreeable all the time, right?
Yes.
That kind of like diminish our own personalities and our own preferences. I think that's a very important thing to note too.
I love that. Having a point of view is what differentiates yourself and sets and forms your identity in the workplace rather than just constantly nodding and listening and staying quiet. Okay, fantastic. So we're coming up on time, but one final thing I want to ask is, for those quiet professionals who are watching and listening, and they want to be seen as calm, confident leaders, let's say within the next year, they're hoping to get promoted next year or two. What is sort of like a mindset shift? We talked a lot about owning your value and trusting yourself and having conviction, but what is sort of like your daily practice or that you can recommend, or what is the one thing that they can start doing today that's going to move them toward that ideal version of themselves?
Read our books.
Yes. Oh, let's show them. Let's show them the books.
I know. I have your books.
Yay. Oh my God. We're going to have to take a photo after this too.
I know. But seriously, that is my tip. Like I do think both our books, when you combine it, offer like really interesting insights to your listeners, your viewers, but it's the process of reading is really what I'm trying to get at, right? The process of reading is very introspective. Like you're reading someone else's words, and when you're reading someone else's words, you're reflecting back on what it means to you, right? That's the process of reading. You're reflecting back on what those words mean to you. And in that process, you start to think about, oh, maybe I need to change my mentality on that. Maybe I need to change my approach on this, right? And it's that experience, it's that process that you can then start to change how you show up at work. Because you can listen to all the podcasts, you can listen to all and watch all the YouTube videos, and you're just consuming. And then you might have those light bulb moments. But I do feel like the process of reading somebody else's words gets you to reflect back on your own behaviors, your own habits in a very quiet way that can actually change something within you, because that's really what it is. It has to start within, right? So that's my promotional, non-promotional answer, but it's true. Like reading, I do think reading our books would be great.
Oh, I love that. Yes, absolutely. So if you haven't already grabbed Jessica's book, Smart Not Loud, How to Get Noticed at Work for All the Right Reasons, be sure to do that.
And they match, by the way. They're both like gold frame, gold.
I noticed that. I love that there's, you have that gold detailing. Okay, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get this book in focus, but we'll do that. We'll do that and we'll take a picture. Awesome, Jessica. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think this had so many nuggets of wisdom. And as always, you're the queen of communication. Like you are amazing in what you do and what you teach. And I think the way that you distill and break it down and make it so easy to understand. And it's just even, me, someone that's in this line of work, I hear the way that you describe it, and I'm just in awe. And I would love for you to share, how can people get connected with you?
Yeah, so I'm all over. Most importantly, and I guess I would say the big one is LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn. I would say that's my main channel in the sense where I'm always sharing communication tips, career tips. So that's my thing. But I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, or you just find, soulcastmedia.com. But of course, the book, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you get your books, and all the versions as well, right? Ebook, audio, all the things. But do connect with me and let me know that you saw me, heard me with Linda, and it'll be great to connect with you all. But Linda, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Loved the conversation. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jessica. And if you want more communication tips, more advice on how you can go from quiet to confident in your career, then be sure to download my free guide, Confident Communication at Work. It's a PDF guide that'll giving away. I'm giving away for free. Just download it in the description box, or you can comment the word confident in the comments and get your free guide. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.